Okay, Abotai, we continue in the Tzurba Rabbanan series in Chod Shabbat. We're in volume 21, Lax Family Edition, the Mervis Family volume. And in this edition, in this volume, we've been dealing with real practical halachot of Shabbat. We saw last week, the last couple of times we saw about Tofer, of sewing and koream and ripping. We saw about being milaben begodim and nikui begodim, and a lot of practical melachot, stuff that actually are happening. Binyan oel. So today we continue in really l'maaseh halachot, malachot that apply on Shabbat. Because majority of the malachot that you're going to find on Shabbat, we don't really practically deal with them. Thank you. But let's take a look at this one. Okay. The first source is Masechet Shabbat, Ayin Dalid Amud Bet. Source number 1 on page 175 in the Tzurba volume over here. Okay, says the Gemara, Keshira b'Mishkan hecha havai. Where did you have tying in the Mishkan? Remember, all 39 melachot are based on activities and ma'asim that they did either in the Mishkan, during the Mishkan process, of what the uptake and that, or to make the Mishkan. So the question is, where do you find tying as part of something that was done in the Mishkan? So, okay, so Amar Rava. So Rava says, Shekin koshrin bi'itdot ohalim, because they would tie down the curtains to the pegs that went into the ground.
Like you mentioned Yeriot. Why are you giving a different example? Yeriot.
That's the example.
No,
they're tying down the Yeriot, the curtains, to the pegs. That's the example.
היריות, יש לך 11 יריות. עכשיו קושר אותם אחד לשני, 5 ו6. אז כל אחד זה הקשירה שלהם.
That may not have been actual tying. That may have been sewing or something else. The Gemara here said, look at the Gemara. What was the koshrin? Shekin koshrin b'tzdot ohalim. They would tie the curtains down to the pegs that would hold them in place. Now the Gemara says this cannot be the kosher that we're talking about. Why? Says the Gemara, Hahu kosher al minat lehatirhu. This kosher, this tying of the curtains down to the pegs is on condition to take it off. In order to be hayav hatat, which means it's a malacha deoraita, it has to be a permanent tie. And these ties were not permanent because you tie down the yeriot, and then a day later Hashem says travel again, right? 2 days later, month later, year later, you take it apart.
But it's Tesher months, It's not
Okay. So you're going with the Rif and the Rambam. That's talking about a professional knot. What exactly is a professional knot? But right now the Gemara says this knot of the tent is not the malacha deoraita, because this is not a permanent knot. Okay. So now the Gemara has to give another answer. So El Omer Abaya says, Sheken orge yeriot. The curtain weavers, shenifseka lehen nima, who had a thread break on them, koshrim otal, would tie it back together. So apparently, apparently, when they would be weaving and making the curtains, the thread might have broken, or the thread may have ran out. And so what they do, they would tie the thread in that spot in order to stop it. So they did a tying over there. So that's the tying in the Mishkan, in the process of making the curtain. So says Amr le Rava. So Rava said to Abaya, Tartzta kosher. Yes, you answered me about tying. But the opposite of tying is matir, releasing. Mater ma ikalememar. What could you say about releasing? Right? Releasing has to be the opposite. So I have a permanent knot, and I release a permanent knot. Here in this curtain, you make a permanent knot, but you never release it because That's how the whole curtain stays together. Release that knot, the whole thread's going to come apart. You're not going to do that. That's not the process of that knot. Once you make it, you stay in never matir. So where do you have this case? So says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Ela Omer Rava. Now in your Tzurba, he skips a few lines as you see those dots over there. So Ela Omer Rava. Ve'itema Rabbi Eli. Sheken Tzadeh Hilazon Koshrin Umatirin. The Hilazon trappers would have traps, and those traps, in order to make those traps, they would need to tie them. What do you need the Hilazon for the Mishkan? Okay, so if you don't have that Rashi here in the Tzurba, but the Rashi says that who can mean dog cotton. So Rashi's lashon is interesting. He says that the Hilazon is a dog cotton, the min dog cotton. Right today, pretty much everyone says that the Hilazon is a type of snail. So Rashi's lashon may not fit so well. A water creature. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, any aquatic animal. Okay, maybe he wasn't so medayik in type of animal. Okay, kamin dog cotton. And it comes up once every 70 years. And that's another issue because now you're finding these all the time. It's not once in 70 years. Maybe we don't understand how it works, but whatever. We're not going to deal with the issue of tchelet. But in order to get this tchelet, you have to get the chilazon, and you needed traps for it. So take a look at Rashi that you do have. A Rashi in you're right, kosher manat la'atir. So says Rashi. Okay, that's the problem when we first answered. You're tying down the curtains to the pegs. So the Gemara said, but that's not permanent. What's the problem? So he says, we're going to learn that it's patur. It's not kol kesher and shokayma ain't a chayiv in alav. It's not a deoraita malacha. It's going to be a derabanan to make a permanent knot, to make a semi-permanent knot. Okay, but if it's going to be releasing, it's not the av malacha deoraita. If it's meant to be released, so therefore that cannot be the case in the Mishkan. So says Rashi to explain kosher matirin, they would use the nets of the chilazon to capture them. They would tie and untie them. What happened? Shikol rishtut rashatot. That's how you say what nets.
Yeah.
Okay, nets rashatot. They would make them with real knots, right? So kesharim vehein kesharei kaima. They would be permanent knots. Now, when would you matir? When would you release these permanent knots? Uvefa'amim shetzarich litol chutim rashit zo reshit zo velosif al zo matir mikan vekosher mikan.
Oh, when we connect it.
Sometimes one of the traps would rip or something would miss. So I would take off one thread from there and put it over there. And that's something that is what's it called permanent. I don't mean to take it off, but at the same time, if something would rip, I would take it off. So there you have kosher and matir. So that's where it was used in the Mishkan. That's where the malacha is derived from. The capturing of the chilazon, making those nets required permanent knots, and sometimes you would release it in order to fix up the knots. Okay? Now, the Tzurba is going to tell us, and we're going to see this in the Gemara, and based on this Gemara, we're going to have a machloket rishonim, which will then translate into a machloket Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, which is what? Is how many level of knots do I have? Okay? How many level of knots? In halacha, how many level of knots do I have? So we already saw there's something called a permanent knot. Okay? Kesher shekayma. This is one that stays. This is a permanent. Then we saw non-permanent knots, which was the ones we tied down to the pegs, the yeriot, the curtains, to the pegs. You tie them down with a semi-permanent knot. All right? That we said is going to be derabana. Are there any knots that are completely mutter? So we're going to see that there are knots that one may tie on Shabbat that are not permanent and they're not semi-permanent. So we're going to have to define what's permanent, what's semi-permanent, and what's not either of them, which would be mutter on Shabbat. Okay, let's see the Mishnah that tells us that there are three categories of what's it called of knots. Okay, so here you are in source number 3 on page 176 in the Tzurba. All right. Although we have the Tzurba in front of you, I prefer to see the Gemara inside. So just hang with me. Okay. Says the Mishnah. The elu kisharim shechayevin alehen. These are the knots that is the malacha that you're chayev and chatat if you did them on Shabbat. What is this? Kesher hagamalin. This is the camel driver's knot. Apparently, they would tie a knot and put it through the nose, I believe, of the camel. And that was a permanent knot that would stay there. And then you had the Kesher Hasafanim, which was the sailor's knots, which was the same thing, a special knot that went through the boat, okay, and it meant to stay there. Okay, so it's again a Kesher Shel Kayimot. So in these two, permanent knots to say, and this is the ones that you're chayiv in aleihen. These are the ones that you're chayiv. Then the Mishnah says, Yesh lecha kisharin she'en chayavin aleihen kekesher gamalin ukekesher asafenim. You have some knots that are not chayav, like the permanent knots of the camel knot and the boat knot and the sailor's knots. So that's the Rif and Rambam versus the Rosh and the Rashi. You're very good. You're on the Mechogis Rishonim right now, but let's see right now. So the Mishnah now says there's another level that you're chayav for, but not chayav a chatat, which means it's the Rabbanim. Okay. Then says the Mishnah, kosheret isha miftach chaluka. A woman may tie the opening of her robe, behutei sevava, strings of a hat, v'shel piskia, or her belt, okay, urtziot, and the straps, min'al v'sandal, of shoes and the sandal. Okay, so here you have three levels. The Mishnah first said, level number 1, you cannot tie. That's the av malacha chayiv chatat. Then you have a second level, which you're chayiv, which means it's pater abul aser, right? You're not chayiv chatat. And then you have the third level, which is mutter to tie. Okay? Now, the Gemara also brings this out very clearly. Take a look at source number 4. Source number 4, the Gemara says as follows. Itmar. It was stated. Hitiritzu otmenau sandal. Untying straps of the shoe or the sandal. Tanehada, one brighter taught Hayiv Hatat. Said you're Hayiv Hatat. It's an Av Malach, you're not allowed to do it. The Tana Idach, and another brighter taught Pater Abel Aser. Untying the knots of the sandal or the shoe is the Rabbanim, Pater Abel Aser. The Tanya Idach, and there was another brighter that taught Mutter Lechatchila, that it's Mutter Lechatchila. So you have 3 types of untying shoes and sandals, or tying shoes and sandals, and one is Aser completely the Gamrei Deoraita, one is Aser the Rabbanan, and one is Mutter Lechatchila. So says the Gemara, Kasha min al amin al. You have a question on shoes, and Kasha sandal. You have a question from the sandal to the sandal. How can it be in one case Hayiv Chatat, one case Aser the Rabbanan, and one case Mutter Lechatchila? So says the Gemara. Says the Gemara. Min al amin al loy kasha. No question. One brighter to the other on the shoe. Had the kitane hayav hatat. This is when we taught that hayav hatat. You know which knot we're talking about? Bid ush kafe. We're dealing with the knot of the ush kafe. What's in the ush kafe? The shoemakers.
Oh,
okay. Ush kafe. Bid ush kafe is translated as shoemakers. So the shoemakers are making what type of knot? A permanent knot. They're making the shoe for you to use. They're putting a permanent knot. This knot is the knot you're not allowed to untie. Why? Because that is a permanent knot. That's the av melacha. Patra aval aser. What is this talking about? B'drabanan. This is the rabbi's knots. Apparently, the rabbis, they since they didn't have to do a lot of walking. Okay, they're sitting in yeshiva all day, so they tied their knots, the knots of their shoes. Right, the tying of the shoes, they would tie it semi-permanent. Okay, it would stay on a long time. They slip in of it, slip out of it. They didn't take it apart every day. Okay, as such, it's a semi-permanent knot. Oh, that's a derabanan semi-permanent. Therefore, it's pater of a lasser. I'll do that type of knot on Shabbat. And the third one, where it says muter lechatchila, where it's muter lechatchila, this bidvnei mechoza. These are the people who lived in Mechoza. What are the people in Mechoza? Apparently, the people in Mechoza, we're going to see, they were very careful of how they dressed and how they tied their shoes. And so every single day they untied it, and every single time they put it back on, they tied it perfectly again. So their knots were never permanent knots. They always took it apart right away. They worried, they took it off. Not like the rabbis who would slip in, slip out. Okay? So it wasn't semi-permanent. It was unpermanent, not all. It was a daily thing. So therefore, that is mutter lechatchila, to make that knot and untake that knot, because it's not permanent at all. So let's go through. All right, good question. It's meant to be permanent. No, that doesn't make a difference. If it's meant to be permanent, like making tzitziot, where you make tzitziot strings, those are meant to stay there forever. Can't do that on Shabbat. Even if I can take them off, put them back on, it's not permanent. It is permanent. It's meant to be permanent. Okay? Now, permanent doesn't mean that it's locked in place and I can never touch it. Permanent means it's meant to be permanent.
Shoemakers, not the lace, not the whole.
Right, not of the sole, not of the pieces. Yes. Not necessarily the knot that you keep your foot inside. Yeah. A different type of knots on the shoe. Okay. Sandal. The sandal on the sandal, also not a question. When do we say the yechayev chatat? B'tayeh diktare ushkafe. That's when it refers to the knots of the Arabian merchants, which the shoemakers tie. Again, a professional, permanent knot that's staying in place. So that's aser. Potter abel aser, that's bidchumarta diktare inhu. Refers to knots which are tied by the wearers themselves. It's a semi-permanent knot. Mutar lechatchila, the sandal denafke betere. Refers to a sandal which two people borrow from each other all the time. So since they're borrowing it and wearing it one another, they're never making a permanent knot. I'm wearing it, and then I take it off, you wear it. So it's back and forth. There's never a permanent knot. Therefore, it's muter lechatchila. Okay? So this was the Mishnah and the Gemara explaining that there are three types of knots. Now, many of you, Avner and Rami, alluded to that these are not just permanent knots, but they're also professional knots. The sailor, right? The what was the other? The camel drivers, the shoemakers. All of them have professions. All of them are professional tires. They're in their profession. So says the Rif. Rif says it's beferish. Look at source number 5 on page 177. This is when we said you're chayav with the shoe of the shoemaker. It's because it is a professional work. The kesher shel kayamahu, and it's permanent. So the Rif says, in order to be chayav hatat, you have to have both factors. It has to be a professional knot, not necessarily professionals doing it, but a professional knot and a permanent knot. Professional style knot and a permanent knot. Two of those are needed. Potter, v'hadatani part of al-asr b'derabanan, the ma'aseh hedyotu, elu shehu kesher shekayma, v'lepikach potter of al-asr. Okay, but had the time with lechatchila b'divnei mechoza kigon ritzui sheyotze od megufa shemenal v'koshon oto al regel v'al achar shenorlin et temanal delav ma'ase uman v'loy kesher shetayma. So when is it mutter lechatchila according to the Rif? It's when it's not a professional tie and it's not a permanent. Okay, so the Rif, Abotai, let's get the Rif straight. The Rif says you're hayav hatat when you have these two things in place. It's a permanent knot and it's a professional style knot. It's a derabanan when you have one or the other. If it's a professional style or it's permanent. And it's mutter lechatchila if it's not professional style and it's not permanent. That's the Rif. And guess what? The Rambam says the same thing. Take a look at the Rambam, source number 6. Says the Rambam. HaKosher kesher shel kayama v'humasa uman kayav. Okay? If it's a permanent style, it's a permanent and it's a professional style, there you're chayav hatat. Kigoin kesher gamalin v'kesher safinin. V'kesher ritzuot manal v'sandal shekosher v'natzanin b'shat asiyatan v'chein kol kayotze v'zeh. Aval HaKosher kesher shel kayama v'enamar uman potter avalasser. Okay, so if you're doing a permanent knot, but it's not a professional style knot, then it is potter of al-asr. It's not allowed to do that. The kesher she'enu shel kayma. If it's not a permanent, the enema uman, and it's not professional, muter lekasher lechatchila. Then you're allowed to tie it lechatchila. Okay, the chol kesher she'enu shel kayma, says the Rambam, im kesher uman harei ze asr. It's the rabbanon. So the Rif, the Rambam, same approach. They're learning the Gemara that it has to be when it's both a professional style knot and a permanent knot. That's your Isser D'Oraita. Either it's permanent or professional style, either or, it's D'Rabanan and Asr. And if it's neither, then it is Mutar L'Chatchila to do it on Shabbat. Right? Rif Rambam. But now we have another approach. The approach of Rashi. Rashi and the Rosh both go this way. And their approach is not on two factors. Their approach is on one factor. Nothing to do with professional. It has to do with permanent. And the real question is, how long is permanent? What does permanent mean? Okay? So let's take a look in Rashi. Rashi in source number 7. So when it talks, remember it talks about the shoe, it said the shoe had the knot of a shoemaker. So it refers to the knot that a shoemaker makes. When he inserts the strap into the shoe, he ties an internal knot, like you were saying, so that it cannot come out and it lasts forever. The hukayem le'olam. That's what Rashi says. No. It's not the one you use to tie your shoes. It's part of the making of the shoe. It's the sole to the top and stuff like that. And it's the hukayem le'olam. And it's meant to be there forever. So that's why it's also d'oraita, because it's a real permanent knot. B'derabanan, says Rashi, keshet shel kayma lohave. It's not a complete permanent knot. Shebeshat tit matirinoto, because when you have some mud in it, you take it off. The koshinoto, and then you tie it, untie it and tie it tightly. So it's a semi-permanent knot. So Rashi says the derabanan that's asur is when it's a semi-permanent knot. Yeah, permanent, semi-permanent, and then b'vnei mechoza. Oh, that's when there shehem rachavei levav umakpidim al levushehen v'nalein. They were very careful with their clothing and shoes to make sure they're all perfect. Okay, v'tzarich lehetiro arvit, and every night when they came home, they would take it off. So they would undo the tie every single day. So according to Rashi, there's one factor to tell me if it's mutter or asr. Is it permanent or not? If it's permanent, it's asr d'oraita. If it's semi-permanent, it's asr d'rabbanan. If it's not permanent, it's mutter l'chatzil. Yes. Ah, very good. Yes. So the Bet Yosef will give us a definition. The Bet Yosef will give us a definition what Rashi holds is permanent, semi-permanent, and mutar lechatchila, because Rashi seems to be going with the time frame that knot will stay in place. Right. The time frame that the knot will stay in place. And you saw when he said mutar lechatchila, he said v'tzarich lehitiro arvit. They every night they would take it off. And that should be mutar according to Rashi.
But it's stable.
If he did it for one day, it seems from Rashi it's mutar to do that. Mutar to tie it and to untie it if it's one day. But we'll go through that. Let's take a look now. So we saw the Gemara, we saw the Rishonim. Now let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. So we're in source number 8. Source number 8 says the Shulchan Aruch. HaKosher kasher shel kayim. Sounds exactly like the Rambam. It's paraphrased. V'huma se'uman, and it's a permanent knot, and it's a professional knot. Right? That was the Rambam and the Rif learned. Chayim, Chayav Chatan. Aval HaKosher kasher shel kayim ve'enuma se'uman. Potter avolaser. Now says the Ramah in the Haggah on source number 8. V'yesh cholkim. And there's those who dispute. Shvilu the kol kesher shel kaima afilu shehedyot chayim in alav. And there are those who hold, says the Ramah, that's the Rashi and the Rosh, who say that it doesn't matter if it's professional or not, as long as it's permanent. That's going to make it chayav chatat adoraita malacha. Says the Shulchan Aruch, continuing, the kesher shel kaima ve'enu masei uman motor the kasher l'chatchila. Right? It's not masei uman, it's not professional, and it's not permanent. You're allowed to tie it. It says the Ramah, whatever you can tie, you can untie. Whatever you can untie, you can tie. The Shulchan Aruch says, im kasher or kasher uman, even if you did a non-permanent tie, but you did a professional style, I raise that also. Okay, so you come out clearly. Shulchan Aruch is like the Rif and the Rambam, and the Ramah is like the like Rashi and the Rosh. Question according to the Ramah and according to the Ashkenazim, would they be mekel when it's a professional knot, but it's not permanent? So this last case of the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch says v'chol kasher she'en shel kaima, so it's not a kasher shel kaima. Im kasher or kasher uman, if it's a professional, hareze aser. Why is he saying this? Because it's the Rabbanan. Because the Rif and the Rambam say it has to have two factors. One factor makes it the Rabbanan. But according to Rashi, it's all time frame. Right? So if a guy made a professional knot, but it's going to come off in the nighttime, can I do it? According to Shulchan Aruch, no. Rif and the Rambam, no. But according to the Rosh and Rashi, it should be permissible. Would the Ramah agree to that? So says the Orchot Shabbat, in source number 9, on page 179, for Ashkenazim, v'lehalacha niktu aposkim lahachmer kishtei hadeot, to be machmer like both deot. So even the Ashkenazim, who are going like the Ramah is going, Rashi and the Rosh say it's old time frame. They say, however, if it's professional, we're going to be machmer like the Rambam and the Rif as well. So they be machmer from two stuff, both sides, Rashi and the Rambam, Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. Okay, says Rabbi Simcha ben Kohen in source number 10. Ashkenazim may not tie any permanent or professional knots. According to the Ramah, it's forbidden to tie any permanent knot, whether professional or not. Any professional knot, whether permanent or temporary, because they're going to hold of both chumras. And then we'll take a look at number 3 later on. Ashkenazim argue what's considered kesher shel kaima versus a temporary versus a one dayer. We'll get into that later. What about Chum Ovadia? How does he paskin? Or basically, how should we paskin for Sfaradim? Do we go with this Ramah and be machmer on both sides? Is it all about time frame, or do we say that we go like the Rambam and the Rif and the Shulchan Aruch? Well, take your guess. What would the Chum Ovadia saying? Hey, I'll say the Shulchan Aruch. So let's take a look. Says the Chazon Ovadia. Okay, if someone tied a knot that's permanent, but it's not professional, Eno Osirim, Ela Midrabanan. It's only Osir Dirabanan. Okay? He gives examples. Tying a rope to a bucket that hangs permanently over a well. One that ties a muzzle to the mouth of an animal permanently. Since these knots are not professional, although they are permanent, they're Osir Dirabanan. HaKosher Kesher Shu Maisa Uman. Eno Kesher Kaima. Eno Osir Ela Midrabanan. So Chazon Ovadia Chamovadia goes with the Rif and the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, and we're not talking so much about the permanency, but rather if it's just permanent, it's going to be just the Rabbanan. According to Ashkenazim, if it's just permanent, it's a Doraita, right? It's a big difference. Doraita, according to Ashkenazim, just for permanency, whereas for Sfaradim, you still can't do a permanent knot. It's still Asa Rabbanan, but at least it wouldn't be a Doraita. All right.
Younger, I had extra time. I was still fishing. So there's a whole book. I remember. I don't know if I still have it. There's so many different knots.
Knots.
How do you put a knot around the hook? It's not. You can't just go ahead and do a double knot. It'll rip. It won't work. The whole chachma, you have to spin it around a few times first, and then bring it in from under, and then over. There's a whole
Right.
chachma. So those, I think, we could all assume
It's definitely professional.
It's definitely professional and
Permanent.
and permanent.
And permanent.
So those would be the
So we're going to have to now really define what does it mean permanent and what does it mean professional. Right? What does it mean professional? What does it mean permanent? I have no idea.
Same way, and that's what's not professional, but it's a type.
Is it permanent?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's still a problem. All right. So we have to know what is considered permanent and what is considered professional. And this way, we would know what is mutter l'chatchila to do, which is if it's not professional and it's not permanent, you're allowed to do it. So let's take a look. We're on page 180, and we're going to start with the Beit Yosef. The Beit Yosef, he wants to do this. He wants to tell us, how do we figure out the days that a knot is considered permanent and is not considered permanent? So he explains as follows. He writes, so he's going to now look in Rashi. He's looking closely in Rashi, in the Gemara that we quoted. He's going through the whole sukkah, he's looking at Rashi. And he says, regarding a knot, which one ties a strap to the camel's nose ring, right, like we talked about, so says Rashi, it's considered permanent because sometimes one leaves it there for a week or two. Okay, so 1 second. Is that permanent or is that semi-permanent? Oh, okay. So maybe that's a semi-permanent. Okay. Oh, okay. Rashi, look at this, the third line. Rashi, right? They're not chayiv like the permanent knots. It's still also the Rabbanon, right? Like the nose ring of the camel. Because you leave it for a week or two. So semi-permanent is called week or two. And then he writes, by the shoes, that what? Sometimes you tie it, and it stays mitkayem Shabbat or Chodesh. Sometimes it stays for a week or for a month.
The meaning is to do it for a day or two, just to hold it for a month or something else.
Okay, so we're defining it. So right now Rashi says two things. Rashi says semi-permanent is a week or two, and permanent seems to be a month. That's the way the Beit Yosef is going to read this. L'chein, take a look at the second paragraph. L'chein, nearly. They call she'ena omed lehitkayem shiv'a yamim. Anything that cannot stay 7 days, right? Then it's considered made to be on time. Mikari also lehitiro. It's considered to be on time from the beginning. B'chol yom v'shari, and it's mutter to do that. The lamed kain rabbeinu midiferish Rashi. Okay, she'asl chatil the kasher sham mipnei shepamai shemniach shvua. It's only leave it a week. Okay, become kasher pam mishmitkayim Shabbat. So says the Beit Yosef, based on what Rashi is saying, the problem is a week. Anything less than a week is not a problem. So we have a limit. The lower limit is that it cannot be a week. If it stays a week, then it's going to be considered a semi-permanent knot. Okay? When is it? Until when is it considered a derabanan? We know it starts at 7 days, derabanan. Semi-permanent, right? At 7 days. When does it come completely permanent? Near Rashi, shekatav upa'amim shemitkayim Shabbat or Chodesh. The kosher eno omedet kayem yoter mechodesh patur. The kosher omedet kayem yoter mechodesh hayav hatat. So the Beit Yosef says, based on what we have in Rashi, the limits are as follows: under 7 days, type of knot that only lasts 7 days, less than 7 days, that is mutar l'chatchila. Between 7 and a month, that's Issa D'Rabbanan. Any knot that lasts a month, that's the Issa D'Oraita.
Again, I leave it there for a month.
The plan, the way, the usual usage of that knot, the plan for that knot is to be 7 days, that's going to be Issa D'Rabbanan. 30 days, that's going to be the Issa D'Oraita. If it's meant to be less than 7 days, according to what you see in the Beit Yosef right now, that is going to be considered mutar. What's our usual usage of shoelaces? Usually untied. Usually untied. We'll go into shoelaces. But the pashtus right now, from what we understand, if it's a shoelace that we take in and off, and within a week we're going to untie it, according to Rashi, it'll be a problem, not a problem at all.
Even if I forget that.
Yeah, even if I forget, as long as my intention originally was, we'll see that. Right, so that's the Rabbanan tie, right? Where they tie and they keep that tie for a long time. Okay, we'll see that. Yes,
kids have those two little cars that they go on, small kids, and get a rope, you tie it to the front of the car and tow it.
Right.
And pull it, start pulling the kids down. Crazy.
So how long is that knot supposed to stay there? So if it's going to be a permanent knot, then it's going to be a problem. Yeah, that's also the D'Oraita. Yeah, for sure. Okay, but that's the way Beit Yosef understands Rashi. The Beit Yosef now brings another opinion of what the limits are, and these are a lot less. Okay, so let's take a look in the in source number 13 on page 181. Yes, Mahari Moab katav v'zel מצאתי באורחות חיים בשם הגאון רבנו פרץ, דכל קשר שעומד ח' ימים, that stays for 8 days without untying it, נקרא קשר של קיימא. 8 days is the limit. Once it's 8 days, that's permanent. Right? According to Rashi, the way he's medayik in Rashi, he says 30 days. According to this pshat, it's only 8 days.
Dealing with timing and dealing with holding.
So we deal with both. So I didn't deal with both. If it's missing one or the other, it's the Rabbanan. It's missing both, then it's mutar. The question now is what's permanent. So we're saying now, according to Rashi, permanent is 30 days. Less than 30 to 7 is semi-permanent, the Rabbanan. And anything less than 7 is mutar. But the Mari Abuhab says, no, 8 days is permanent. V'gam lefizeh yesh lomar, the davka ba'asula tiro b'chol yom, hu dishari l'chatchila. The only time it's not considered semi-permanent, it's when you take it off by the day, daily. You daily untie it. Then it's going to be considered un. So you have here machloket in the Beit Yosef how to make the limits according to Rashi and the Mari Abuhab. Is the limit like Rashi 7 days? It's considered not a knot and it's mutar l'chatchila to do it, or is it like the Mari Abuhab, which is 1 day? Is it 30 days to be D'Oraita, or is it 8 days to be D'Oraita? So it's a pretty big machloket, right? The dates. So says the Ramah. Let's take a look at the Ramah. The Ramah brings both shitot. Source number 14. It's considered a permanent knot. If it's not, meant to take off that day, it's considered a permanent not. V'yesh mekilin lomar de'ad shiva yamim lo mikra shel kaima. It's not considered semi-permanent until it lasts 7 days. So you have here a machloket. The Mishnah Brura. So it's daily or 24. That's what Shabbat was going to deal with. But right now, what we have is this. We have as follows. We have 7 to 30, right? And the other machloket is 1 to 8. 8 is considered d'oraita and permanent, and after 1 is considered the rabbanan. Less than 24. Now the what's it called? The Beit Yosef said b'chol yom lahatiro b'chol yom, and the Ramah said be'oto yom atzmo lahatir be'oto yom atzmo, which seems to be on that day itself. Does that mean that I tie it in the morning, take it off in the night, or does it mean 24 hours? Doesn't mean that. So the Mishnah Berurah on source 15 on page 182 is towards the end of the source on page 182. Says Mishnah Berurah, the chol pachot mechavdalet shaot beyomo mikre. It's considered that day. So it's not that calendar day, but rather the 24-hour period. So if I tie something on the Friday night and by Saturday night, before 24 hours, I untie it, right? So that's not going to be considered kesher shel kaim. Okay, so that's on that. So far, this is what we have, Rabotai. We have a lot of opinions of what's permanent. Take a look at the box on page 182, the top box, the top beige box. In summary, the poskim dispute the definition of a non-permanent knot that one may tie on Shabbat. Which one's mutar, which one's not. According to some, the length of time that's meant to be left for must be no more than 24 hours, where according to others, it may be up to 7 days. Now, the Shulchan Aruch, he writes in another source, in source 16 over here, in Shin Yud Zayin Sif Dalet, he writes, the knot used to tie our buckets, which are not permanent, is not eno kesher shel kayama, is not considered a kesher shel kayama. So the well, they have the bucket. Sometimes they would tie it, and Shulchan Aruch says it's not considered kesher shel kayama. Now this knot lasted more than 1 day, so some want to bring this as a proof that lasting more than 1 day is still considered not permanent, not even semi-permanent, and it's mutar, because Shulchan Aruch said it's eno kesher shel kayama. And the Bir Halacha writes towards the end of source 17, umizeh tzad gadol lehakel b'makom hatzorich. You can go with Rashi that anything that's less than 7 days is mutar to tie until it's 7 days. It's not going to be considered mikash. It's not going to be considered kasher shel kaima in a makom tzarech. So in a makom tzarech, when it's needed, you can go with the higher limit of 7 days. When it's not a need, if I want to tie something, then 1 day is your limit. Okay? Take a look at the Hazon Ovadia on page 183. And he says, right? They some will say anything that's not going to be untied on the day, it's considered kesher kaima. V'yesh chokim v'omrim shekol she'ena kesher mitkayim b'meshach sheva yomim lo nikra kesher shel kaima u'mutar l'kasher b'Shabbat v'chen ikar la'akel kisavra achrona, and it's appropriate to make the lenient opinion of like the last opinion, which means kesher shel kaima is not unless it lasts for 7 days. Anything less than 7 days is not going to be considered kesher shel kaima, which is very interesting. In the Yalkut Yosef, before we get to the Yalkut Yosef, let's read the Ha'ara over here. Ha'ara Yud Aleph on page 183, source 18. Chazon Avadi is giving his reasoning for this. And he says the reason is, why did I say 7 days? It's definitely not considered a kesher shel kaima. Yesh lanu sveik sveika lahakil. we have a double suffix to be mekel. Right? Shemu halacha karif Rambam. Maybe the halacha is like the rif in the Rambam. Shekol she'enu ma'aseh uman. I feel also like kaim's man, even if it's meant to last long, right? Ma'al kol panim at shiva yomim mutal chatchila. According to the rif in the Rambam, this would be mutal chatchila if it's meant to last only 7 days and it's not professional. Okay, so you have one. The imtins let me get that Rashi v'harosh. Maybe when I say Zati and the Rosh is only based on timing. Shemesh v'kol she'asul atir tok shiva yomim. Then maybe, like the opinion the Beit Yosef brought, that it's only 7 days. Mutul chatchila. V'havi like sveik sveika b'derabanan, right? And this is a sveik sveika derabanan. Why is sveik sveika derabanan? Because in order to be the right, it has to have both professional and permanency. And here you're only dealing with permanency, so it's a derabanan, and it's a sveik sveika in a derabanan. Sveik sveika in derabanan says Chamabadia. You can be mekel, and so you have up to 7 days to be considered a kasher shulkai. Okay. Now, what I wanted to bring was in the Yalkut Yosef. In the Yalkut Yosef, he brings interestingly enough as follows. Right, it's over here. Listen to this. And I don't know where it's from. Someone can tell me. I'll gladly know. I don't have a chance to go through it too much. But listen, he writes over here. So he writes as follows. As long as one intends to untie it within 7 days, right? It's permissible to tie one's shoes on Shabbat. Since permissible to tie a simple knot with a slip on top of it, as long as one intends to untie within 7 days. Some poskim ruled that it's permitted only if one intends to be untied within 3 days. And that was another limit, right? So far we saw 1 and 7. The Yalkut Yosef brings another limit of being 3, right? And therefore, all poskim agree that one may tie one's shoes on Shabbat, even if one intends to keep one's shoes on through Saturday night and Sunday. So as long as one plans to untie them within 3 days, it's unquestionably permitted. One should be lenient and follow the opinion that it's up to 7 days has a halachic basis to rely on. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out, that the Yalkut Yosef seems to have another lower limit. So now we have 3 lower limits. We have the most extreme, which is 1 day. If it's not untied in 1 day, it's considered a semi-permanent kesher kaima, and it's usher. And then you have the other opinions up to 3 days. And then you have the most mekel opinion, which is Rashi's opinion, which is 7 days. And until 7 days, if it's not meant to last 7 days, it's not going to be considered a kesher shel kaima. Let's take a look 1 second outside of the Tzurba for a moment in the laws of Shabbat. And then we'll just finish up the last piece, Rabotai. So on page 46 over here, any knot, which is usually untied within 7 days, is not considered a permanent knot. That's halakha l'maaseh for us. Any knot, which is usually untied within 7 days, it's not considered a permanent knot. As long as it's not considered a professional knot, right, you would be able to tie that on Shabbat. We're not dealing with cutting scissors right now. So we'll deal with that. We're gonna go all the maaseh we're gonna have. We're gonna go through garbage bags tying, and fruit bags, and your ties, all these different things. There's pictures in the back you can see. Let's just finish up with this last piece over here. What happens if a person knows when the knot will be removed? Right, that's all our cases so far. What if he doesn't know? He doesn't know when it's going to be removed. He's not sure when it's going to be removed. I'm tying it. Maybe it'll come in 3 days. Maybe it'll be in 7 days. Maybe it'll be in 30 days. What's the story over there? Says on page 184, in case where there is doubt as to whether he will leave it for a long time, such that it will be defined as permanent, or whether he will untie it earlier. This is including the category of it not meant to last for a long period, and tying it results in a liability to bring a sin offering. So says the Shabbat, if you're not sure when it's coming off, don't tie it. He said you might come to be Hayam Hatat. Right? So you got to be careful. So here comes the question about the garbage bag. Can I tie the garbage bag? What happens with the garbage bag? It stays like that. But I really don't care about it. Right? That was who remembers when we were dealing with the diapers? The same story with the diapers. Closing the diapers in the end, right? Can I close it? Right? I'm sewing it back together, and I'm staying in permanent. The dirty diaper, and I'm throwing it out. And Chavaji said, don't close because you don't want to do Taifer again. Leave it open. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and you can see it again in page 185 in the Minchas Shlomo. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, listen, I don't know, throwing it out in the garbage, it's not considered Kesher Shokaima. I don't care about it. Open, doesn't open. Kesher Shokaima means I want it to be there. I want it to stay there. There are those who argue, Rav Nisim Karelitz and others who say, no, that is considered permanent, and you'll not be able to tie the garbage bag and throw it out because you're throwing it out like Kesher Shokaima, and it stays like that forever. So on Shabbat, you shouldn't tie garbage bags, says Nitzan Karel. There are his opinions to be made. The last halakha I want to see is in source 22, which is something that we alluded to already. What happens? I'm tying it, and my kavanah is to untie it tomorrow. But usually people tie this forever, like the case of the tzitzit strings, right? So I'm saying I'm allowed to tie this on Shabbat. Why? Because I'm tying it. It's going to be on tomorrow. I'll take it apart. Right? But I'll take it apart. Is that mutar or not? Is it solely on my intention, or it's also based on what the world does? So the Bir Alacham writes in the end of page 186, on the bottom of there, he writes, the nira, the kesha shedarko shel olam, la asoto b'kviut, right? Lo azlinan, but tar machshavat, kosher levatel shem kesher memedu. Doesn't mevatel by your machshava. If the olam does this as a permanent knot, then you can't say, it's a permanent, but I'm thinking I'm taking it off tomorrow. No, it goes by the intention of the world. And here the laws of Shabbat, any knot which is usually tied and not ever untied, such as the knots on tzitzit, may not be tied on Shabbat, even if my intention is to untie. It doesn't work. Okay, Rabbi, we'll end up over here. Hashem, next time we'll pick up here. We have minyan. Amen.